Imagine you're flying a fighter jet. You're just diving at hundreds of miles an hour straight down toward an enemy runway.
Oh man, the pressure.
Right. The sky around you
Yeah.
is just total chaos.
Yeah.
The G-forces are literally crushing you into your seat, and you're milliseconds away from releasing your payload.
Yeah.
Then you look at the canopy and you realize something absolutely terrifying.
Uh-oh.
The ground is thousands of feet closer than your instruments say it is.
Wow. That is a nightmare scenario.
It is, and in that split second,
Yeah.
you can't radio base for advice. You can't take a poll on what the safest maneuver is. And you definitely don't have the luxury of caring what anyone else thinks of you in that exact moment.
No, definitely not.
You either trust your internal map to instantly recalculate your reality, or, well, you crash.
You crash. Yeah, I mean, it's the ultimate test of what you actually rely on when the external world completely betrays your expectations.
Exactly. And that extreme moment brings us to you listening right now. So welcome to today's deep dive, where we are putting the structural foundation of a human life under a microscope.
Which is a huge topic, but so necessary.
It really is. And we're pulling from an incredibly diverse stack of material today to help us answer one seemingly simple but just entirely profound question. Where is your anchor point?
Right.
To get to the bottom of this, we're looking at the writings of a 12th century Chinese Zen master named Fuken Yuan. We've got the private diaries of the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius.
Some modern historians in there, too.
Yep, modern historians, contemporary leadership psychology, and yes, the harrowing combat account of an Israeli fighter pilot that I just teased.
The sheer span of time and human experience we're looking at today is just incredible. But what unites all of these thinkers is this shared obsession with a single structural problem. Like, how do you build a life from the inside out rather than becoming completely dependent on a wildly unpredictable external world?
Okay, let's unpack this, because before we can talk about building this, bulletproof internal anchor, we have to look at the massive danger of doing the exact opposite.
Yeah, the cautionary tale.
Right. We need to examine what it looks like when you construct your identity entirely on the shifting opinions of the crowd.
We really do, because to understand the cure, you first have to understand the pathology, right? And Robert Greene's analysis of the grandiose leader provides just the perfect cautionary tale here.
Oh, I love Robert Greene stuff.
Yeah, he's great. And he describes a very specific species of leader who constructs their entire sense of self from the outside in. They essentially perform the sensibilities of ordinary people as, like, a survival tactic.
Right. They make this massive show of eating the same junk food the crowd eats or watching the same lowbrow movies.
Exactly.
And very loudly proclaiming their hatred for the so-called cultural elites. They act like they're just one of the guys, even when they're literally sitting in a gilded palace.
What's fascinating here is the underlying mechanism at play. Because it isn't just cheap political theater. I mean, it is that, but it's also almost quasi-mystical and deeply, deeply irrational.
How do you mean?
Well, by performing those ordinary tastes so aggressively, the grandiose leader is attempting to absorb the crowd into their own identity. In their own mind, they kind of cease to be an individual. They literally become the movement. They become the nation.
Oh, I see. So the logic is, if they are the nation, then to follow them is simply to be a patriot.
Right.
And to criticize them is an act of treason against the group itself.
Exactly. That is the trap they set for the public, yes. But it's also a massive trap for themselves, because they outsource their sense of self so completely to public attention that they start to depend on it like oxygen.
Wow.
If you remove the roaring crowds and the constant validation, the machinery just breaks down completely. There is literally nothing left underneath the performance.
That sounds completely exhausting.
He really is.
But, applying that to everyday life, most of us aren't grandiose demagogues trying to absorb a nation into our egos.
Hopefully not.
Right, hopefully not. But aren't we making the exact same structural error when we tie our baseline happiness to just being liked by our peers? Or, being praised by our boss, or getting that promotion at work?
Oh, absolutely.
It feels like we're building a house on the back of a moving truck. You're just handing the steering wheel of your own brain to a complete stranger who, by the way, have their own problems, and you're just hoping they drive you somewhere nice.
That's a great way to put it. You are making the exact same bet as the grandiose leader, just on a much smaller scale. You're handing the master controls of your inner life over to circumstances and people you just cannot govern.
Yeah.
Green's practical advice for dealing with these leaders is simply do not feed their egos by giving them what they crave. But if you flip that around, it's actually a diagnosis of a fundamental human error. Building an identity on things outside your control isn't just a bad habit. It is a mathematically doomed strategy.
Mathematically doomed. Okay, but if tying your happiness to external praise is a trap, you're left with this massive void. Like, what actually goes in that space?
Right. You need something to replace it.
Exactly. And historian Jill Lepore has a pretty sobering perspective on this that really recalibrates how you view your own achievements.
She does.
She points out that most of what once existed in the world is simply gone, just dust. History is basically just the study of whatever happened to survive.
Yeah.
And she says what remains is maddeningly uneven, asymmetrical, and unfair.
It forces a total perspective shift, and this directly echoes the mindset of Marcus Aurelius.
The Stoic emperor himself.
The very one. Here is a man who literally commanded the entire Roman world. Yet, writing privately in his meditations, which, by the way, was a journal he never intended for anyone else to read.
Right, it was just for him.
Just for him. He constantly reminded himself that empires crumble. He wrote about how grand buildings fall into ruin, ancient traditions dissolve, and even the greatest civilizations eventually become nothing more than a handful of coins and broken statues.
So his logic was that anchoring your well-being to lasting legacy or some sort of permanent achievement is just a terrible wager against very long odds, because everything fades, even for an emperor.
It all fades. Which means the only rational place to put your anchor is in the present action itself.
Right.
There's this brilliant analogy that often comes up in Stoic philosophy regarding an actor on a stage.
Oh yeah, let's talk about the actor analogy.
So if an actor is entirely obsessed with whether the critics sitting in the front row are going to write a good review of his performance, he is perpetually at their mercy.
Just sweating it out.
Exactly. He's anxious. He's slightly modifying his timing to please people who might just be having a bad day or who don't even like the play to begin with.
Right. He's completely disconnected from the craft because he's living in the hypothetical future of the review.
Exactly. But an actor who pours everything he has into the performance itself, into the mechanics of the craft, into the raw emotion of the moment he finds solid ground, the performance belongs to him.
Okay, I like that.
The ambition shouldn't be to win the award. It should be to play the role with full effort. The focus shifts entirely from what happens to you to how you respond. That response is the internal anchor.
Wait, okay. I love the actor analogy in theory, but what happens when you just totally bomb on stage?
Ah, right.
Because it's one thing to say, oh, I don't care about the critics. But what happens when you forget your lines, you trip over the scenery, and completely fail on your own terms? Like, if my anchor is my own action and my action was terrible today, doesn't my entire foundation crack?
That is the million-dollar question. And the messy reality of the Stoics themselves actually provides the answer here.
Because they weren't perfect either.
Far from it. None of them lived unblemished, perfect lives. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, he got into petty, embarrassing feuds. Seneca famously became deeply entangled with the tyrant Nero. He was literally writing speeches to justify Nero's horrific behavior.
Wow. Yeah, that's a pretty bad day at the office.
It really is. Cato had his political scandals. Even Marcus Aurelius made massive historic mistakes, particularly in his succession planning, by leaving the Roman Empire to his disastrous son, Commodus.
Right. They weren't just these perfect marble statues. They were highly flawed human beings making massive blunders.
Exactly. And the crucial practice here isn't to make excuses for the failure, but it also isn't to be utterly paralyzed by it. The mechanics of Stoicism require you to contextualize failure.
Contextualize it.
Yes. One error, even a massive, humiliating one in a long life of aspiring toward virtue, is not a final verdict on your soul. It is simply one entry in a very long ledger.
I really like that visual. A ledger entry.
Right. When you view your own failures through the lens of a continuous ledger rather than a final judgment, it offers the exact mercy you need to wake up the next day, recalculate, and keep going.
It just strips the apocalyptic drama right out of making a mistake.
It really does.
But, you know, philosophizing about ledgers and internal anchors is pretty easy when life is relatively calm and you're sitting in a quiet room.
Yeah.
We need to talk about what happens when our comfortable assumptions violently collide with a terrifying reality.
Which happens to all of us eventually.
Right. And this brings us back to Stephen Pressfield's incredible story from the Six-Day War.
Oh man, this scenario is the ultimate stress test for everything we've been discussing.
It really is.
Yeah.
So Pressfield recounts the combat experience of an Israeli fighter pilot named Hemi Shmuel.
Right.
Shmuel is flying a combat mission, diving down at hundreds of miles an hour onto an enemy airfield to drop his ordnance. But suddenly, right in the middle of this high-speed dive, he realizes something catastrophic.
Yeah.
His bomb release altitude was calculated for the sea-level airfields he'd have been attacking earlier that morning.
Yeah.
But he isn't at sea level anymore.
Yeah, he's not.
He's over the Syrian plateau, which sits thousands of feet above sea level. So the ground is rushing up at him way faster than his instruments suggest, and he's dropping his bombs dangerously low.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Pressfield uses this harrowing split second to introduce a storytelling concept called Act Two.
Act 2.
Yeah. In a movie or a novel, Act Two is the moment when the protagonist can no longer avoid the central conflict. They are forced to engage. The illusion of safety just shatters.
Right.
In real life, Act Two is that exact moment Shmuel is experiencing. It's when the ground you thought you knew turns out to be hostile terrain, and every comfortable assumption you made that morning is suddenly obsolete.
And Shmuel only survives because he manages to pull his jet out of the dive at impossibly high G-forces. And get this, he's saved literally by the delayed fuses on his own bombs. If they had detonated on impact, he would have blown himself right out of the sky.
Unreal.
But the core reason he survived wasn't just blind luck. It was because his training was so deeply internalized. He had built such a robust, accurate internal map of his aircraft and his own physical limits that he could recalculate his reality in a fraction of a second. There's this principle mentioned in the material, no misses in training.
Yes. No misses in training means you are painstakingly, rigorously ensuring that your internal mental map matches physical reality as closely as humanly possible.
Right.
When Act Two arrives, and it always arrives, if your internal model is mismatched with the actual terrain, the result is fatal. You simply do not have the time to look around for external validation or ask a crowd for their opinion when you're pulling 9 Gs over the Syrian plateau.
It feels like if you can't measure your worth by external applause, and you have to rely entirely on this internal altimeter, what happens when we try to calibrate that altimeter using other people's lives?
Oh, that's dangerous.
Like adjusting our internal map based on the salary our neighbor makes,
Yeah.
or, the house our college roommate just bought.
You are stepping right into the comparison trap, which is a guaranteed way to crash. There is a note from an anonymous journal writer that phrases the mechanism perfectly. They wrote, "If you continuously compare yourself to others, you become bitter. But if you continuously compete versus yourself, you become better."
Compare equals bitter, compete equals better. I mean, the rhyming makes it sound really simple, but the psychology there is brutal.
It is. Think about the mechanics of it. If your internal altimeter is calibrated against what other people have achieved or the social status they hold, you are essentially setting your flight instruments to someone else's sea level.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And just like the pilot, that mismatch with your own actual reality will drive you right into the ground. Self-competition is the only reliable way to find your true datum point. You can only accurately measure against where you were yesterday, not where someone else is today.
So if our internal map shouldn't be calibrated to wealth or status or, comparing ourselves to the neighbor's new car, we need a completely different coordinate system. What is the actual target?
Good question.
Interestingly, to figure out how to live right now, we are pushed to look at the very end of life.
It's a counterintuitive pivot, but stripping away the illusion of time is incredibly clarifying.
Matthew Lucato poses a really blunt question here. He asks, when you are in your final days, what will you want? Will you hug your diploma? Will you ask to go sit in your fancy car? Will you find comfort in your bank statement?
Obviously not.
Exactly. The answer is obviously no. When all the noise fades and the external world slips away, what will matter most is people.
Which brings Aristotle's philosophy into sharp focus.
Aristotle.
Aristotle had this beautiful, famous 8-word definition of friendship. He said, a friend is a single soul dwelling in two bodies.
Wow.
Now, it's very easy to read that and dismiss it as just a sentimental line for a greeting card. But philosophically, this is an ontological reality.
Wait, hold on. Ontological reality is a pretty heavy academic term. Like, break down how that actually works in practice.
Okay, fair.
Yeah.
It means it isn't just a feeling or a shared hobby. It means your actual identities and nervous systems become intertwined.
Oh, I see.
You physically and mentally exist in a shared space where their well-being is literally indistinguishable from your own. Genuine connection isn't a status marker you can acquire. It's a shared existence that absolutely requires your presence, your deep attention, and your care over a long period of time. You cannot fake an ontological reality.
Wait, I have to challenge this.
Go for it.
Because a minute ago we were talking about Marcus Aurelius and his solitary ledger, ignoring the crowd and building an entirely internal anchor.
Right.
But now we're saying the ultimate goal of human life is a single soul in two bodies with someone else. Isn't focusing entirely on your own internal altimeter inherently selfish and isolating? Like, how do you reconcile the solitary Stoic with Aristotle's completely merged soul?
It is a brilliant tension to point out, but they actually rely on each other.
How so?
Think about the mechanics of the grandiose leader again. You cannot cultivate an Aristotelian friendship if you're constantly chasing outcomes, managing your public image, or trying to absorb people into your ego.
Because you're just using them?
Exactly. When you finally discard all those peripheral external desires, the wealth, the status, the desperate need for applause, what is left underneath is the actual capacity for genuine connection. Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote that the only person you are destined to become is the person you decide to be. By deciding to drop the external performance, you finally become capable of being a true friend.
Okay, that makes total sense. You physically cannot be present for someone else's pain or joy if you're constantly scanning the room to see who is clapping for you.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the final hurdle. We have established what matters, and we know why the external anchor fails. But how do we actually execute this philosophy? Because it's very clear that the battle isn't won in grand cinematic moments. The internal anchor is forged on a mundane Monday morning.
It all comes down to the daily routine. That is where the actual concrete is poured.
Mike Murdoch sums this up perfectly. He says, the secret of your future is hidden in your daily routine. It's not in vision boards. It's not in that one burst of peak motivation you get after watching a documentary at 2 a.m. It's in the unglamorous routine. But how do we stop this from just feeling like another exhausting to-do list? There's a mention of getting into an effortless state. How do you manufacture that?
You build it through a specific daily structure. Wake up with determination. Go to sleep with satisfaction.
Sounds nice.
And now, again, that sounds like a cheesy slogan you'd see stenciled on a gym wall. But it's actually a rigorous psychological prescription. Having determination in the morning means you are actively choosing your internal anchor before the external world has a chance to reset it for you. You are deciding who you will be before you check a single email, before you look at the news, and before anyone demands anything of you.
You're setting your own altimeter before you even take off.
Precisely. And going to sleep with satisfaction at night doesn't mean you won the day. It doesn't mean you closed the deal or that everyone praised you. Satisfaction simply requires that you acted on your intentions. You held your own standard regardless of what the external scoreboard said.
Emerson touches on this perfectly when he says, he who is not every day conquering some fear has not learned the secret of life. And the absolute key word in that quote is every day.
Every day.
You don't wait for Act 2 to arrive to start being brave. You practice conquering fear in ordinary, boring circumstances. You initiate the difficult conversation you've been avoiding. You admit a mistake at work instead of hiding it. You do it daily so that when the ground really shifts and the G-forces hit, your internal resources are already fully online.
That daily practice is the only way to ensure your internal map matches reality.
So what does this all mean? When we put all these pieces together, what is the ultimate symptom that you're actually doing this right?
Eckhart Tolle observes that the symptom of a rightly ordered life is actually gratitude. Yes. He points out that gratitude arises completely spontaneously when you go deeply into the present moment. It isn't a forced technique where you sit down with a journal and aggressively force yourself to list 3 things you are thankful for. It is a natural byproduct of your anchor being secured in the right place.
When your well-being finally rests in your own actions rather than how those actions are received by the crowd, the present moment completely opens up to you. You simply cannot experience that kind of spontaneous gratitude when you're busy managing a PR campaign for your own ego.
It's impossible.
It all circles back to Fu Tianyuan's three essentials from the 12th century. Humility, which is just a brutally honest assessment of where you stand. Clarity, which is knowing what actually matters and what is just noise.
Mm,
And courage, which is acting on that knowledge regardless of the audience in the front row.
beautifully said.
They're all entirely inward dispositions. You can either spend your life endlessly searching for a beautiful place, or you can make a place beautiful. The difference is entirely about where your anchor is set.
It's a choice you make, and then defend, and then renew every single morning of your life.
I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder as you go about your day. It builds off a really beautiful passing observation from those anonymous journal notes we talked about. The writer notes simply that laughter is the same in all languages.
I love that.
Yeah. If a true internal anchor naturally produces genuine gratitude and real connection, and if something as pure as laughter is universal, how much of the conflict we see in the world today is simply billions of people desperately trying to force their external anchors onto everyone else? And more importantly, if you commit to this internal practice starting tomorrow morning, who in your life might finally feel safe enough to drop their external anchor too? Dive deep. Build it to last.